Well, hello everybody. I'm going to do a review on this Stihl SR-450 mist blower I picked up. The reason I purchased this is I'd been paying a company to take care of my mosquito issues around here, and the products were great, but the service was just so-so. I'm not going to get into who it was, that's just my personal experience, so I decided to invest in it and take care of my own issues. Now, these do retail for $699.99, so it's not an inexpensive piece of equipment, and this is the larger of the two that they sell. But with that being said, it's going to pay for itself in about 12 uses on my end. So that's money well spent in my opinion. Now, it does come with a 2-year warranty, but the local dealer I picked it up from said if I purchased a 6-pack of their 2-cycle engine oil, which happens to be a synthetic oil, that I could extend my warranty out to 4 years. So for 15 bucks I went ahead and did that. There is a little bit of assembly that's going to be required here, so we're going to step through it and get it put together, and I'll give you my thoughts on it. I actually paid $6.86 for this in lieu of $6.99. I was able to beat them down and haggle with them just a little bit, simply because if I wrote them a check, then they wouldn't have to pay credit card processing, so I took that deal. Might as well keep the money in my pocket, right? So anyway, these are the components that came with it. Of course, the manual, all these other miscellaneous doodads and doohickeys we'll get to as we move along. It did come with a spark plug wrench and a Torx end socket here. I don't believe there's a place to store this on the unit. It'd be nice if they would add one so it's there if you need it. It did come with a little screwdriver, I'm assuming for adjusting the carburetor. A few screws, miscellaneous brackets. These are the actual deflectors to change your pattern when you're misting. This, I believe, would blow out in a soft bloom. You can do it without it for maximum distance. This one right here is for if you're doing maybe rows of plants or something, it will send it off in 2 directions. And then this one, I believe, points up at 45 degrees. For my application, I'll probably just simply be using this one here. It did come with an anti-static chain. You can also use this as a duster. So let's say if you're maybe using it for putting out fertilizer or some other powdered chemical or something along those lines, you need to make sure you add that chain to keep static from building up here and possibly causing an explosion. I'm not going to be installing that on mine. I'll just keep it for future use because I don't envision myself ever doing anything like that with it. But you'd also do not want to ever stand on any surface that's not earth. You know, don't stand on concrete and do it, because you may build up static discharge. Just a little safety. It's all in the manual there. This is called a spacer. Best I can tell, all it does is keep items from hitting the muffler outlet right here. Alright, well, this is the first step in getting everything put together. This ring right here is split. You have to open it up and get it on the inside of this ridge temporarily. And then there's a flat side on this ring here that goes on here. There is an O-ring on that. Then you're supposed to put this tube on. Then split your clamp and get it over here. There's a mark on the clamp here and one on this tube. Line those up, put in the screw and tighten it up. I'm not going to do it that way, primarily because I can just tell that it is going to be a difficult proposition to get this on that. So the way I'm going to do it is set this down on the floor. I'm going to put this in first, snap it in there. Then I'm going to come in with a little bit of valve stem grease. This is just silicone grease. A light film, very light film around this O-ring right here. That'll help it pivot back and forth and prolong the life of this particular O-ring. Then I will put this on, move the clamp over, line up the marks, and tighten it up. I would highly recommend doing it that way instead of wrestling with this tube trying to get that on there. That was extremely difficult to get that to snap in there. I'm not sure if you can see the round rings on my hands here. That was from complete compression of this, full body weight, laying into it, and then finally it snapped in. So I would highly recommend installing it that way in lieu of messing with it the way they said to. Alright, I've got this put together now. You don't want to tighten this up all the way. You still want to be able to move the tube like that. So just get it snug. I tightened it up to where it was binding, then backed it off just a little bit. This back part's almost like the first one. This clamp has a raised rim on both sides of it. When it's put on finally, there's a groove right here. It needs to fit down in that groove. So its final resting position will be right here. Line up these marks. There are two. Tighten it up. The marks go towards the back of the unit. For now, I'll put it over here. I'll get the tube on, move it back, and put in that screw and tighten it up. Alright, well, before I install that tube, I needed to show how to install this anti-static kit. It comes with the chain with a spring, an anti-static cable, steel cable, and a screw. Just simply put them on the screw like this, and there's a hole right here where it gets installed. The chain drags the ground to discharge or prevent any static from building up. This wire would actually be fed down into the tube and just laying loose in there, and then you would install the tube on the unit. Like I said, I'm not using mine, so it'll just get stored away, but I am going to go ahead and run my screw in this hole just so I don't lose it, and it'll be there. Alright, well, I've got the flexible tube installed, but I need to make a small correction. I said that the raised rim on this clamp went down in a little groove. Well, I never put everything together, so that was incorrect. It actually sits on the back side and then lines up right here. I do have these on the outside. That's just based on the picture, and they will come down the tube and get clamped on here. At this point, I'm supposed to put it on my back and adjust this grip here for a comfortable position for me, but I'm going to be doing that as my last step, and then install the screw here and tighten it up. But they say in the manual, for whatever reason, that you need to maintain at least 19.7 inches from the front of this to right down through here on this grip. Why that's the case, I do not know, but that's what they say. Alright, well, I've worked this wire clamp around here to hold the lines and hoses, one in each corresponding to their size, and I just need to loop this around here, and that's all it takes there to hold these in place. I was going to just go ahead and install this spacer here, but it's turning out to be more than what it should be. Clearly shows here in these instructions, put the top in first, push in the bottom, number 2, snap it in. Yeah, right. That's not happening. So what I'm going to do is take this little pick here and try to get into this groove, and I'm going to bend this section down and try to rock it underneath there, because this is not a friendly process, I can tell you. I hope I can get it in one shot here, but it's just, I almost had it. Come on. Nope. Sliding around on me. But I just wanted to show this because this needs a redesign. This is ridiculous. I've got it almost in there. I need to try to get this vein, or this little orange section, to pop out a little bit and let it go in. You know, when I run into difficult things like this, I try to be honest and show how hard something really is. Well, I'm taking up too much of your time here. Something's not jiving. I think I may have got it. There. Holy cow. Not supposed to be that hard. Whatever. Alright, well I've got everything buttoned up. I've adjusted the throttle to my liking, but I need to check the adjustment on the throttle itself to make sure it's adjusted properly. Now they say in the manual to go full throttle and slowly turn a screw in right here. It's in this hole. Slowly turn it in until you're met with a little bit of resistance and then go with a full turn. Well, the screw is the type where it's difficult to turn anyway, so it doesn't loosen up or change its setting. So I've basically backed it off to where I know it is not adjusted at all, and I'm going to get into that screw. It's a very shallow slot in that screw and it's difficult to get a good bite on it, but I'm just basically holding the throttle with my thumb and adjusting this until it just moves. And there, it's just started moving on me. Now I'm going to rotate it one turn. Now I know I'll get full throttle when I pull this trigger. After that cable stretches out over time, I may have to go back in and make an adjustment here, but that's just an easier way to make sure you get it right. Alright, well I'm going to go over the different uses it can be used for and how to convert it, because it is convertible. Number one, you could just use it as a standard blower. Number two, you can use it for mist blowing, which is my purpose. Or number three, you could use it for dusting and spreading. I'm going to go over the function for me first, which is mist blowing. Now this tank here has a very large lid on it, a big open hole. And there is a strainer in here that you can remove, which is part of the process for doing dust or spreading. I'll be using it. You are supposed to grease this gasket in here. It doesn't say what type of grease to use, but I am going to be using the same silicone based grease that I was using earlier. One thing I do not like about it, a minor annoyance, is it's only marked in liters here on the tank. Well, that's just not who I am. I work in gallons, quarts, pints, this, that, and the other. So I will measure it out and make the proper reference marks for myself. But this tank does come off. On the side you can pinch these two little clips and snap the tank open. Unlatch them and the tank comes right off. Now there's an arrow right here. And there's two indicators here. This side over here is for dusting or spreading. This side is for mist blowing. So you simply turn the tank in whichever function you want to use. In my case, the arrow is going to be on this side for misting. Just hook the clamps, snap them in until they click. And you're back in action. This is the lever that regulates the dusting and spreading mode. This would be in its off position, and that would of course let more material out. In misting, you would leave it in the off position right here. Of course there's a safety here and your throttle, but it's pretty cool. It also basically has cruise control on it. Right here is the full or run position, but there are two stages. All the way up would give you a third throttle, and the second stage I believe is 3/4 throttle, and then of course run back again. To kill the unit you just simply push this down and it will stop. This is the flow of fluid, the lever here that turns it on or off. This is in the off position, so get it started. When you get ready to roll, open this up, and then when you're finished, close it back off and turn it off. This is the metering device right here that would regulate how much flow is actually going to go through it. There are 6 numbers on here, 6 positions, so there should be different orifice sizes in here to regulate how much comes out. It's set on 1 right now. That would be the lowest setting. You just simply turn it to whichever one you want all the way up to 6. There is a kit that can be purchased. It's a ULV kit, or ultra low volume, which basically includes a different metering device here and a screen that would be installed in the unit up top. If one were going to use the ULV kit, it would come with a screen like I'd mentioned, and it basically snaps in right here. I guess it filters out some finer particulate over the strainer, because the orifice on that would probably be much smaller than what's here. So that would help trap anything so you don't actually plug up down on the other end of it. Even though I'm not going to be using it for dusting and spreading, I'm going to go ahead and go over the conversion procedure that might be helpful to other folks that might. First and foremost, you have to make sure you install that discharge kit for the any static buildup with the chain and that cable. But to convert it, of course, clean out your tank and empty it out. You can see here on the bottom of the tank, this side here is for the liquid to come out. If you're going to be using it on the other side, you would simply turn the tank around and reinstall it. And by doing that, it would allow your powder or your dust or whatever you're doing to come out on this side. Now that's what that lever is for. You can see when I move this lever, it will actually open up this port, kind of like a standard yard spreader you would push around, and that will regulate how much material is coming out. Again, this is the lever here that would be used to meter that material coming down that chute. If you're going to be in mist blow mode, which I am, that would remain in this position, I believe. And if you're doing dusting and spreading, you want this liquid line here to be in the off position. But there's a little bit more to convert this that we need to go over. Okay, to continue the conversion into dusting or spreading, the front nozzle needs to be taken off, but in turn so does this hose right here, and it's held on with a clamp. They positioned this wrong at the factory. They have the slot where you would get to it on the bottom down in here. I was able to get in there with a small screwdriver and pop it open so I could reposition the clamp and tighten it back up. But to get them apart, there's a small slot right here. You just stick your screwdriver in and turn it, and the clamp will pop open. Pull your hose off. If you're going to go back to this type of a setup, put your hose back on, put your clamp on and grab it with a pair of pliers here and squeeze it, and it will lock itself. After you get the hose disconnected here, you need to take this nozzle off. You just simply turn it to hide this, and then you can pull it off. And if you want to switch back to a misting mode, then you put everything back the way it was. Well, I'm not sure what they call this, but I'm going to call it a diverter. This is the one I'm going to be using. It just simply snaps on the end. Just like so. If you want to change it for any reason, you just take it right off. Alright guys, well I had to go get a fresh fuel mix for it. I typically do not run ethanol in my small engines if at all possible. It tends to make them run hotter. It causes some damage internally. I'm not going to get into it. A lot of you guys know what I'm speaking of. So I'm running actually a 91 octane in this. I just put a little bit of fuel in it. It's not been pulled over at all, so I'm going to see what it takes to get this thing running. Here we go. I'm going to try it there with 5 pumps, even though I don't have any fuel in here yet. Right off the bat. I'm going to let it idle till it warm up. Alright, well I've got it warmed up just at an idle, so I'm going to try a warm start on it now and see if it comes up first pull. Runs pretty good and surprisingly quiet. I've just put some water in it, maybe a gallon and a half or so. So I'm going to fire it back up and just show the mist blowing on various settings if I can. Might have been difficult to see, but it works well. Alright, well, as far as the maintenance schedule goes and all that jazz, it's all outlined in the manual. I haven't even read it. Not going to go into that in the video. But just a couple things to point out. The spark plug's actually underneath that black boot right there. Pull it up out of the way and you can gain access with the wrench that was supplied with it. The filter and pre-filter is right over here under this cover in the side. There's two screws. You can use the same tool, gain access to that. The pre-filter was saturated a little bit with oil, like I would expect. And it's a nice filter that's in it. It seems to run pretty well right out of the box, but sometimes you need to adjust them for your particular fuel mixture, or your gasoline rather. Adjust the carburetor. It should be outlined in the manual somewhere. It seems a little unresponsive right off throttle. It ramps up a little bit slow. I may tweak on it. That may be the nature of them. I do not know, but I'll adjust that outside the video. Well, alright guys, these are my final thoughts on this SR-450 as far as my experience goes with it. Pros and cons. The pros first. It is a great piece of equipment. It seems like it's going to be lasting for me for the long haul. Now, this is not your typical homeowner grade piece of equipment. This is professional grade stuff we're dealing with here, so of course it carries a fairly hefty price tag. They do sell an SR-200, smaller tank, smaller engine, just pretty much smaller all the way around. I do not know how much they are, but I would guess maybe $450, $500 or so, somewhere around in there. That could be considered another option that might be affordable to some folks. Now, moving into the cons, or things that I think they need to address, is first and foremost, number one, that spacer right there was just ridiculously difficult to put on. Nothing should be that difficult. Maybe that's why they don't install them at the factory, because they can't get them on in enough time. It is a little bit heavy, but you would expect it to be. I think the unit itself weighs about 28 pounds dry, and that's not too bad. But you start adding about 8 pounds per gallon of water you put in it, it stacks up pretty quick. It is difficult to get it up off the ground and get it on, even though I don't have it full. It's a little more difficult, especially since it's kind of top heavy with water sloshing around in it or chemicals. I would recommend putting it up on maybe a tailgate of a truck or a deck or whatever. Fill it up, do what you need to do, get it running, and slip into it and walk away. It would be beneficial if they somehow could put some vanes partially in this tank, internal it, so it is not sloshing, or it minimizes the sloshing a little bit of the liquid moving back and forth. Because as you walk, it is kind of top heavy and it kind of wants to steer you as it moves around. It's not very difficult, you just can't run with it, you know. I'll get used to it. That's one thing I think they could improve on. One thing I think would be a very cool feature is When you turn the unit off, you have to remember to shut off your flow of chemical, or you're just going to be dripping it out the end. And if it drips into the tube and you don't shut it off and blow the tube out, the next time you start it up, it's going to blast all that out before you're even ready to go, because it's already going to be in the tube. Well, what I think would be cool is when you hit the stop to kill it, if that switch is in the position to let it flow, it should have a trigger or release on it that closes the valve as you turn it off. I think that would be a cool feature to add into it. So Stihl, if you're watching this, take it and run with it, because that'll be a better product. Overall, I am completely satisfied with it right now. Even though I've not used it for my intended application, I know full well it's going to work perfectly for me. I found it odd that there's very little bit of information out here on this unit. You can't really find them for sale online. I had to contact a local dealer. You can't really see reviews or anything on them unless they're in other countries, and you don't really see anything. So as far as I'm concerned, this is their first review on this tool. I hope this helps you guys out in some way. Thanks for watching, and good luck.